Have you ever really stopped to think about how the food you eat actually becomes the energy that lets you, well, do anything? We throw around words like calories and energy, but what's really going on down at the microscopic level? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the incredible story of metabolism. And let's forget the dry textbook definitions for a minute. This is the story of how every living thing, including you, pays its energy bills to stay alive. And to get it, we have to start big.
I mean, really, really big. Picture our entire planet. From the tiniest little microbe deep in the soil to the biggest blue whale in the ocean, everything, and I mean everything, is plugged into this gigantic energy economy. And the ultimate power source? It's the sun. That energy gets captured, it gets used, it gets passed along, and eventually it radiates away as heat. It's this constant flow. And metabolism, that's the engine that makes the whole thing go.
Okay, so from the scale of the entire planet, let's zoom way in, down past the ecosystems, past you, right down into a single one of your cells. Because that's where the real action is. Every single one of your cells has to pay its own energy bill, second by second, just to exist. And this is where our story really kicks off. So what is metabolism really? At its heart, it's pretty simple. It's the grand total of all the chemical reactions happening inside a cell just to keep it from, falling apart. It's this constant humming buzz of activity. And we can basically split this whole operation into two main teams, working in complete opposition to each other. So on one side, you've got catabolism. You can think of this as the demolition crew. Its job is to take big, complex molecules, like the sugar from your lunch, and break them down to release the energy that's stored inside. Then, on the other side, you have enamelism. This is the construction crew. It grabs that energy and uses it to build all the new, complicated stuff the cell needs to survive, like new proteins or DNA. Now, for this explainer, we're going to follow the demolition crew. We're focusing on catabolism, the story of how we get that energy in the first place.
But here's a really important point. When a cell breaks down food, the energy doesn't just get released in some chaotic explosion. I mean, can you imagine? That would be incredibly destructive and wasteful. No, the cell is way smarter than that. It has this really elegant system to carefully capture that energy and move it around exactly where it's needed, using a few specialized molecules. So, let's meet our key players.
Meet the absolute superstar of this whole operation, ATP. That stands for adenosine triphosphate. If a cell were a tiny little city, ATP is its cash. It's the spendable energy currency. It's this small, rechargeable molecule that carries a perfect little packet of energy in its chemical bonds. So anytime a cell needs to do any kind of work, and I mean anything, from contracting a muscle to firing a neuron, it spends an ATP. It just snaps off one of those bonds, releases that burst of energy, and the job gets done.
But ATP doesn't work alone. It's got a couple of critical sidekicks, NADH and FADH2. Now, if ATP is the cash used to buy things, think of these two as the armored trucks, or maybe better, energy taxis. Their whole job is to pick up the really high energy stuff, in this case, supercharged electrons that get released when food is broken down. Then they shuttle those electrons over to the cell's power plant, where they can be cashed in for a ton of ATP. So remember these three, ATP, NADH, and FADH2. They're the main characters here.
All right, we've met the players. Now let's follow the action. The journey almost always starts with a simple molecule of fuel. The most common one is glucose, which is just a simple sugar. We're going to follow the fate of one single glucose molecule as our cells starts the process of wringing out every last drop of energy. And the very first stage is just about cracking it open.
Now, here's the key thing. This cell doesn't just light a match and blow up the glucose molecule. Instead, it uses the super elegant 10-step process to carefully take it apart piece by piece. This way, it can capture little bits of energy at each step without losing it all as useless heat. It's all about control and efficiency. And this whole beautiful 10-step chemical dance is called glycolysis. So here's how it goes down. We start with our 6-carbon glucose molecule, and through a series of reactions that actually cost a little bit of ATP to get started, you got to spend money to make money, the cell perfectly splits that glucose right in half. What you're left with are 2 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. And along the way, the cell manages to load up a couple of those NADH energy taxis. But here's the kicker. After all that work, all 10 of those precise chemical steps, what's the net profit? 2. A measly 2 molecules of ATP. That's it.
Now, it's better than nothing, for sure, but the huge majority of the energy that was in that original glucose molecule, it's still locked up inside those two pyruvate molecules. The real payoff hasn't even started yet. And this brings our cell to a massive decision point. It's got these two pyruvate molecules full of potential. But what it does next represents a huge fork in the metabolic road. The path it chooses will determine whether it gets just a tiny bit more energy or an absolute windfall. And the entire decision, this massive choice, boils down to one very simple question. Is there any oxygen around? Yep, the simple presence or absence of oxygen completely changes the game. It determines the fate of that pyruvate and how much energy your cell is about to make. So if there's no oxygen available, the cell has to take a shortcut. It goes through fermentation. This is kind of a quick and dirty process, like what happens in your muscles when you're in an all-out sprint. It's a short-term fix just to keep making those two little ATPs. But if oxygen is around, oh, then it's a whole different story. The cell can go through respiration. This is the main event. This is the pathway that leads to the massive energy jackpot. And you guessed it, that's the path we're going to follow. All right, let's do this. Oxygen is on the scene. Our two pyruvate molecules get escorted into the cell's power plants, the famous mitochondria. We are now officially entering the big leagues, the stages where the vast, vast majority of energy from that one little glucose molecule is finally going to get harvested. The first stop inside the mitochondria is a looping series of reactions called the Krebs cycle. Now, its main job is to take that pyruvate, systematically rip it apart, and release the rest of its energy. The carbon atoms end up as carbon dioxide. Yep, the very same stuff you're exhaling right now. And most importantly, all that released energy is used to load up an army of those energy taxis, NADH and FADH2. It just churns them out, fully loaded and ready to go. So, where are all these loaded up energy taxis headed? They're all driving to the final stage, the grand finale, the electron transport system. This is where they finally cash in their chips. It works in 3 basic steps. First, the taxis arrive and drop off their precious cargo, those high-energy electrons. Second, those electrons get passed down a line of proteins, kind of like a bucket brigade. And third, with each handoff, a little burst of energy is released. And that energy is used to do one very specific job: pump protons across a membrane. So the cell is just pumping and pumping and pumping all these protons to one side of a membrane. And what this does is it creates a huge buildup, a massive gradient. You get tons of protons crammed into one little space, all desperately wanting to flow back to the other side where there's more room. This buildup of pressure, this stored energy, is called the proton motive force. And the best analogy, honestly, is a hydroelectric dam. The cell has built up this incredible potential energy, like a massive amount of water held back by a dam. And now, all it has to do is open the floodgates. And this is the moment we've been waiting for. The cell opens the gates, and those protons come rushing back across the membrane. But they can only go through one special channel, an amazing molecular machine called ATP synthase. As the protons pour through, they spin this thing like a water wheel. And that spinning motion, that mechanical energy, is used to crank out ATP molecules at an incredible rate. So let's look at the final score. Glycolysis gave us a net of 2 ATP. The Krebs cycle gave us another 2, but the electron transport system, cashing in all those energy taxis, it churns out some around 34 ATP. I mean, look at that difference. It's not even a contest. That's the payoff. So you see, it's so much more than just food and calories. It's this beautiful, complex, and incredibly efficient molecular dance. The food you eat provides the glucose, and the oxygen you're breathing in right now, that's the final destination for those electrons at the very end of that bucket brigade. It's what allows the whole amazing process to happen. So the next time you eat a meal, or even just take a deep breath, take a second to remember that incredible, intricate dance happening trillions of times over, right inside you. That is what powers you.